How are you? And thanks very much for taking the time to talk to me again for Access Noize, Catherine.
Oh, my pleasure, Mark. Thank you for having me again. It's been a few years, I think, hasn't it?
Yeah, last album, I think, your first album.
Yeah, but a few
And,
years.
and a lot's happened since then. I'll get the lockdown bit out of the way. How have you been coping during the madness of the lockdown and the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I've been fine. I think I'm fairly kind of well cut out for this hermit-like existence. I think having been on tour for a good number of years, being away from friends and family for a long period of time, I think that's kind of set me up quite well.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not saying that isn't getting to me now. We're almost a year in. Um, but on the whole, I'm so lucky. I've got my home studio. I've been able to carry on working.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I'm certainly a lot better off than people who are still working in the hospitals or key workers.
Hmm.
So yeah, can't complain.
Hmm. So you've found the time inspirational as a songwriter then? You've got stuck into your work then?
I wouldn't say necessarily that I've been writing a lot.
Hmm.
Partly because during lockdown, there's been a lot of focus on the release of records that I've been sat on for quite a while. So first of all, in the summer, there was a release of the Bernard Butler collaboration that we've both been sat on for about 5 years. And then Anchoress 2, my new record, was supposed to come out last March. And obviously, once it became apparent what was going on in the world, that kind of got a pause put on it. And obviously, it's coming out this March
Hmm.
instead. So I think it's quite difficult as a songwriter to want to make new music when you haven't kind of got rid of what you've already made. I think
Hmm.
it's kind of backed up, isn't it? Really, but I did do a kind of quarantine covers series, which is fun from a kind of technical point of view. Sitting in the
Hmm.
studio, exploring and reimagining some of the songs that I love. So I still got to kind of flex my studio
Hmm.
muscles a little bit. But yeah, I have begun a little bit to write stuff, but it always feels weird kind of talking about the next record when
Yeah.
this one isn't even out. But yeah, I'm always writing.
And you mentioned the album In Memory of My Feelings with Bernard Butler, which you've been sitting on for 4 years. You released that as Catherine Anne Davies. So, and your new record is as the Anchoress. So, when you're writing songs, how do you decide which is for the Anchoress and which is for yourself?
Well, the Bernard collaboration actually happened before the first Anchoress album came out, so I guess that it was Catherine Anne Davies because that's who I was when we
Right.
were collaborating. Um, Nothing more exciting than that, really. And I think that when it was about two people in a room writing songs together for a project that was collaborative, whereas the Anchoress is it's about my kind of singular vision and about on the most part kind of doing the bulk of it on my own. And I think there's a kind of coherence in terms of the themes and the sounds and the kind of lyrical preoccupations across the records as well. But it really was as simple as with the memory of my feelings. We had our last writing session in 2015. That's a year before Confessions
Mm-hmm.
came out. So yeah, bit of a transformation there, but partly as well, I think that the songs that Bernard and I wrote together came from a different place. They're quite a lot more personal, I think, than the Anchoress has tended to be. That's more of a persona that I can kind of explore things through. Um, so yeah, I hope that's not too confusing to people. It's
Mm-hmm.
more we kind of saw it as well a little bit like the Polly Jean Harvey and John Parrish records that
Yeah.
they've done together. They've done too. And that's Polly Jean Harvey. It's not PJ Harvey, which is her kind of musical persona. So that kind of made sense to me just for it to be under that name, really, and contractual label reasons as well, partly too.
Well, how did you find working with Bernard? Because he's a legend. I'm a big fan of his work, especially with Sweden.
And it's such a long time ago when we first started working together. I was still at university. I was a kid, basically walking into a room with this legend. As far as I
Mm-hmm.
was concerned, I was quite in awe of him. But he was just really good at kind of getting past that very quickly. And I would say it's probably the easiest and quickest co-writing experience I've ever had. Um, and he's just very work focused, and we're not there to kind of have a chat and mess around. We're there to write some great songs, and we came out of those sessions with 10 really classic songs, as far as I'm concerned, that I feel really proud of.
Hmm.
So it was great, you know, and it's so nice with Bernard as well because he's such an incredible guitar player. It felt a little bit like a holiday for me making that record because I could just let somebody else take the load off a lot of the things that I tend to put upon myself.
Hmm.
Um, and it just dovetailed really nicely that we had really complementary kind of skill sets on the album. Um, so yeah, it was really just a very, I would say it's just a very easy process.
Yeah.
The songs came easily.
Hmm.
There was no kind of stress about it. It didn't feel like work.
No, it's a great album. I really really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I was actually playing it today again. It's really good. Uh, but we're here mainly to talk about your new album, The Art of Losing, which deals with trauma and losing lost ones or loved ones uh, that you've had to deal with over the past few years. Writing the album, was it therapeutic? Writing the songs, did it help heal?
God, that's a good question. It's one I thought about a lot. Um, I try not to think of songwriting as therapy. You know, I think there's therapy for that, and I've had a lot of that. Um,
Hmm.
but I think there is obviously going to always be something cathartic about working. It was more of a working through of what had happened to me rather
Hmm.
than. For me, it's like catharsis is. It suggests it's like a kind of valve. You just let it out, and then once it's out, you're fine. And
Hmm.
that was sort of what the album cover art is kind of a play on. Actually, I don't know if people have seen it. It's me. Actually, it's one behind my computer. I'm just going to grab it. So it's me
Yeah, it's a great cover.
vomiting up or inhaling kind of book pages of a book, um, and I wanted it to be ambiguous because I wanted it to kind of explore that ambivalence between, you know, is songwriting cathartic? Are we vomiting out, you know, our experiences onto the page and writing them? Or in some ways, was it more of a two-way street in that the things that I was experiencing and breathing in and consuming became me? So I think it's more complicated than just it being therapeutic. But yeah, certainly it's always helpful to process, you know, anything difficult
Hmm.
that you've been through. Did it take away or distract from the loss I experienced? No. Would I have swapped it to make a really happy record? Yes. But you know, you can only make make a make meat out of what you get given. And what's that old phrase? You know, if life gives you lemons, make lemonade.
Hmm.
And that's what I did. Not the Beyonce record.
Well, considering the subject matter of the album, there's certain songs sound very upbeat. Was it hard to sort of strike that balance?
No, that was really conscious and very intentional. I thought it would have been easy artistically to have written a record of slow, down tempo, mournful ballads. And that just wasn't interesting to me as a producer or as a songwriter. And always, I mean, that kind of goes back to your question about whether it was therapeutic. It's like, for me, making a record is not about indulging myself, it's
Hmm.
about making a great piece of work. So I would set myself very kind of firm boundaries. So, for instance, with the latest single, The Art of Losing, the title track, I said, right, this is going to be 138 BPM. You know, it's quite fast. And I knew that I needed those kind of tracks that were more up tempo. But also, I partly wanted to set that as a challenge for, you know, how do we write about loss and death and grief and trauma in a way that hasn't been done before? You know, poets and writers and musicians have been talking about this for a long time. You know, it's not everyone encounters death. But I guess I wanted to challenge myself to think, well, how can I approach this in a different way than what's been done before? And part of that was the sonic palette, to not just rely on what people might expect, that kind of dark and somber thing, but to embrace the anger to some extent and the
Hmm.
chaos and the turmoil that comes with trauma. So yeah, a lot of the up tempo stuff, I guess, is partly a certain reconciliation with
Hmm.
the events and what had happened, but also just a conscious need to explore it in a different way.
And
Can't all be Leonard Cohen.
it's quite timely, actually. The Art of Losing coming out now, considering people are losing their lives every single day due to
Yeah.
the pandemic. Were you aware of that there when you were sort of about to put it? Well, I suppose you probably wrote it before the pandemic. It would have, or was there any written?
Yeah, it was finished. It was finished in 2019.
All right.
So I could not have foreseen a kind of global pandemic, but it's obviously something I've been reflecting upon. In a way, it's been quite serendipitous because, you know, I needed a bit of time before it came out anyway to put myself into a place where I could talk about the record, where I could go on tour, ironically, and where I was just, you know, looking after myself as well. And then, you know, no one could have foreseen that we would be thrown into this situation that we're currently in. We, you know, 1,800 people a day are losing their lives in England. It's horrific. But obviously, I wouldn't say it's the upside, of course, but it is a consequence of that I guess the themes are going to resonate with people. I think, you know, the British are not great at talking about death. We like to pretend it's something that happens to other people. And I have my theories about why, you know, kind of COVID denial is so rife. It's partly because of that. It's like a protective mechanism. People don't want to believe it's true because it is so awful. So, you know, perhaps if there's anything good to be taken from all of this, it is that we will have to become more comfortable confronting our own mortality, that we will have to be more comfortable being emotional about losing people that we love. So yeah, I think it's taken on a whole new level of resonance that I could never have anticipated. I hope, you know, it can be helpful to people in some way. I don't know if it will be, but I certainly know with the last record, you know, a lot of people sent me messages about how it has, you know, helped them through difficult times, and that's all you can try and do as a musician, isn't it?
Yeah. A lot of the songs are piano based. Is the piano your go-to instrument when you're writing songs, when you're sitting there and an idea just comes into your head?
Well, I think on the new record, it's kind of, I mean, maybe this is, I would say it's so much less piano focused than the first album, and I know a lot of people have been surprised at just how much guitar there is, and I've kind of returned to that. But also, I think, you know, the vintage synthesizers are very much at the fore. I'm just looking at the tracks and just thinking, I think there's only one song that's on the piano in the whole 14 tracks. And I think I really moved. I wouldn't say I moved away from the piano being my kind of main songwriting instrument, but I went back to the guitar, which was the first thing that I wrote songs on, and obviously acquired a load of gear that equally inspired things like Art of Losing and Shut Your Face were both written on synths respectively. So yeah, it's a real different approach to songwriting for me, certainly.
Well, James Dean Bradfield of the Manic Street Preachers features on Show Your Face, and he does a duet with you on The Exchange. I know you're a big Manics fan, so, you know, what was it like calling? I mean, you can just call him up now. I know you did the track Dylan and Caitlin as well on the Manics last album. Is that correct? So can you just call James up?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
and just call James.
I can call him up, but that doesn't mean that you don't get a kind of sense of trepidation when you do it. You know, I still, James is on my phone. Yeah, I can text him. He calls me, but calling him up to ask for something, you still feel like, I feel a little bit like a kind of that 11-year-old, you know, Manic stuff on my wall, kind of a little, you know, I am still in awe of them, and I purposely kind of kept them at arm's length to some extent because, you know, I grew up idolizing them, and it's a value to me to still have them there to look up to. So yeah, I wasn't entirely certain he was going to say yes. It was a bit of a case of, you know, oh, well, I did Caitlin, how do you feel about returning a favour? I was a bit cheeky actually when I framed it to him, but he was so lovely and he was like, of course, absolutely. And then, so he sung on The Exchange, which is the duet on the album. And then I was really super cheeky, pushing my luck. I think I must have been on tour in like Italy at the time. And this track, Show Your Face, was just kind of lacking something. And I was just dropped him a text and was like, I know it's really cheeky. I said, but, you know, if you're at a loose end, do you mind having a chat about this song, maybe throwing some guitar on? I feel it really needs, you know, something kind of the Holy Bible, kind of like post-rock, kind of angular guitar. And yeah, he said yes. So I think I've used up all of my goodwill there.
What would be your favourite Manics album?
Oh, that's impossible. That's cruel. It changes. It depends on my mood, really. The ones that mean a lot to me and are kind of my go-tos, I guess, are probably Rewind the film. I find I have quite an emotional attachment to that Holy Bible, God Against the Soul, Generation Terrorist. It's Resistance is Futile, actually. You know, the last album, it has a really special place in my heart. Not because I was a part of it, but because the memories that I have of, you know, going on tour with them and, you know, performing that stuff in arenas was really special. I was going through absolute hell at the time, and, you know, they really took me under their wing, professionally and emotionally. You know, come into the dressing room and James sit around and chat and see how I'm doing. They're just absolutely lovely people, and they genuinely really care. So yeah, Resistance is Futile. It has a real, you know, special place in my heart at the moment.
I think mine would be This Is My Truth.
That was the first album that I bought of theirs.
It's a bit more commercial than a lot of the other ones, and it was, I suppose, after everything. I think it followed Everything Must Go.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not like the oracle on it, but yeah, I think so.
Yeah, You're Tender and You're Tired. Amazing tune. Love it.
It's a great record. That was my gateway album. So.
Was it?
Yeah, that was my first one. My first time I went to see them as
Right.
well.
Right.
No. My mum would be waiting outside in the car for me. She'd go to the cinema. She'd drop me off, go to the cinema, pick me up, and went to school the next day.
And I'm sure it blew your mind seeing them for the first time.
Yep, it still blows my mind seeing them. I still, where I can, get out there and get down the front if I can, or get out there and it's lovely that everyone that works with them is a bit like that. Last time I think I saw them, you know, me and Dave Eringer were sitting in the audience, you know, just really rocking out. And it's lovely to see that everyone who works with them still feels that about them. It's not just me kind of still hanging on to that. We're all big fans of the band.
Yeah, I've seen them a few times myself. I love them. But my gateway album was the first album.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just remember hearing Motorcycle Emptiness on MTV, and I just went, "This is amazing! You know, what is this?" The first album is a bit overlong, but it's good.
That's such a strange song for me, because I'd heard about Motorcycle Emptiness for years before I heard it.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a strange thing to say. Obviously, this is like before streaming, and before I could really afford CDs, and obviously I would, like, you know, get all their old interviews off the internet, and I remember just reading about this song and imagining what it would sound like before I heard it, and it didn't actually sound anything like I thought it would. I think I was a bit like, what? I don't know what this is, but obviously I love it now. But it's weird when you kind of imagine what a song sounds like. It makes me think of that kind of Kurt Cobain quote where he used to say that he wrote songs like how he thought a lot of the albums that he read about what they would sound like, not having heard them.
That's interesting, actually. That's very interesting. Another great collaboration on the album, Sterling Campbell, David Bowie's drummer. How did that come about?
Yep. That came about through a kind of mutual friend of mine, and also Simple Minds. So Mariam McNulty, who mixes on the record, we became friends back in, I think it was about 2015. So he'd been working with David Bowie for about, I think it was about 10 years. Had heard White Donner Confessions, and we just had a lot in common in terms of our interests in plugins and gear and prints and Nine Inch Nails. And we just kind of became like Skype friends, I would say. And Mary happens to be best friends with Sterling. And then this weird collision happened where I was touring in Australia with Simple Minds, and the B-52s were supporting us. And Sterling happened to be playing the drums of the B-52s. Guess who'd come out with him for 4 weeks to keep him company? Mario. So thus ensued probably one of the nicest tours that I've done, where I got to hang out with these just two absolutely wonderful, like really just sweet guys. So yeah, we just became friends, and then when it came to, there were some tracks that weren't working on the record in terms of the drums that had been recorded, and I just, you know, asked him if he would be up for having a go, and yeah, that's how you get Sterling Campbell on the record. You just ask and ye shall receive.
And did he play drums in all the tracks, or some?
No, not all of them. So it's a real mix across the records of stuff that was recorded at Conk with John Barnett, and then a lot of programming actually that I ended up doing. Because I was working on my own pretty much most of the time, I needed to kind of work the tracks up to know what they were going to sound like. And then Sterling came in at the end and redid certain tracks, and just kind of came in on ones that I'd written right at the last minute as well. So it's quite a mixture across the record. The credits are very extensive in the album. if you want to read it, it's all in there. I can't even, to be honest, it's so long ago, I can't remember who did what.
I've only had a stream of the album. By the way, it's great. Really, really enjoyed it. So the stream obviously doesn't have all the liner notes, so that's how I had to ask. My favorite song on the album is Unravel. Where you locked yourself in the cupboard to record the vocal. Tell me about that.
Unravel, I almost took off the record because it wasn't working for me, and I couldn't work out why. And it was something to do with the vocal and the way that I had. It's quite strange recording your own vocal. There's a reason why people work with engineers normally and work with other producers. And when you're doing it yourself, there's no kind of barometer of, there's no one to perform to either. So it was a little bit of a kind of method acting, really, to get a sense of what was the mood I was trying to conjure, and it was that sense of claustrophobia and feeling trapped. The song is about, a kind of really toxic dynamic, and I just put myself into that cupboard over there in my studio, and just sung into the mic that way, and then ended up doing a couple of takes actually kind of David Bowie style, quite far away from the mic in the middle of the room. Terrible in terms of engineering technique. You're not supposed to do things like that, but it just works. And it was one of the few vocal takes on the record where the whole chorus is just one take. I would never normally do that because I love to edit and fiddle, but there was just an emotion there. So yeah, a bit of method acting on myself.
No,
I was kind of split into two. I was like producer and performer at the same time. Really odd. Wouldn't recommend it.
Out of all the tracks, what's the song that means most to you on the album?
It's really difficult. I'm gonna have a look again.
There is a lot of tracks on it, so I suppose
probably My Confessor, I would say, because I'd started recording that sometime before I approached the album as, I'm recording the second album. And in the middle of recording My Confessor, literally in the middle of recording it, I got a call from my mum to say that my dad had died. So it's like there's always this sense, which is just really strange, to know that the guitar that is on the album was captured in time in that moment when my dad took his last breath. It's like, I can talk about this now and not get up to that, just about. And that's really, I couldn't go back to that song for a couple of years. I couldn't finish it because it was just too difficult. So I guess, that means a lot to me that I was able to finish it and that I was able to capture that moment and put it on a record, and it will always be there. That's important to me. My dad was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumour, and there was a very short space of time from that diagnosis to when he very suddenly died of a pulmonary embolism as a result of the radiotherapy that he was having, which is a really common side effect of radiotherapy. They don't tell you this. So it's just very shocking. It was, not, although I had prepared in some way that he had a terminal diagnosis and was going to pass, we were not prepared for it to happen that quickly and in that way. So that was just a real kind of sucker punch that kicked off a chain of events over a few years, which is what the record documents, really. So yeah, My Confessor is probably the song that means the most because it was the catalyst for the whole album, but also it begins to literally embody those themes of loss and death. This is very depressing, isn't it?
It's fine. Do you have any plans to take the album out on the road when it's safe to do so, and we can all go back to enjoying ourselves again?
I did. I mean, I think we have rescheduled the Queen Elizabeth Hall show 3 times now. I think we can all be optimistic that I will be playing it eventually. I have a feeling it may not be till 2022. My agent scheduled a UK and a European tour. Obviously, a lot's happened since they were scheduled, including Brexit. So yeah, I do have plans to play them. It's going to be, again, it's such a serendipitous kind of collision of events because probably it's going to do me the world of good for there to be this really big stretch of time before I have to play it live, because these are tricky songs to embody and
Yeah.
perform. So I may be the only person in the music industry who's slightly relieved that we can't tour and play live at the moment. Them's the breaks.
Well, you've also been doing a podcast as well, the Art of Losing podcast. Have you enjoyed putting that together as well?
Yeah, I'm not so sure enjoyed is quite the word, but it was partly something I wanted to explore the kind of themes around the record a little bit more deeply. And I have found that really therapeutic, actually. Going back to your first question, the podcast has been immensely therapeutic, and I have made some really brilliant friends from those conversations as well. And there's going to be a season 2 as well, but that probably won't be out now until after the album's out, obviously, because of lockdown. We've had to kind of change the way that I've been recording it. But that's been amazing. I got to have conversations like with Mariam Nolsi about making the Lost David Bowie album after he died. I got to talk to Patrick Jones, Nicky Wire's brother, about the poetry of loss after his mother died. I got to talk to journalist Kat Lister about writing of her book, which is about young widowhood. I did an amazing podcast with a wonderful person that's become a really good friend of mine, Sophie Daniels, talking about baby loss. And that was a big hurdle for me, because I'm normally immensely private, and to kick off the podcast season talking about these things that she'd been through and I had been through was a real kind of like, let's rip the plaster off. Yeah. Let's kind of see, how does it feel for me to be that open with an audience? And I'm immensely in awe of her, because she does so much campaigning work for Tommy's and Sands around stillbirth, and I've just made such good friends off the back of it, and continue to meet such interesting, brave and courageous people. And I think the people that have been listening as well have found it really helpful, which is nice.
Look forward to season 2 whenever it comes around. I mean, you've been quite busy. I'd say probably the last 10 years. You put out like 3 albums. You've collaborated. You supported the Manics. You became a member of Simple Minds. You did 2 albums with Simple Minds and went on tour. And Robert Smith invited you to perform at the Meltdown Festival. So, looking back at that time, do you have any highlights out of all that?
God, it's just impossible to pick one. I think all of it has, been amazing. Getting the opportunity to tour with Simple Minds for 4 years, I learned so much from them. Experienced things I never would have dreamed of. Wasn't something I had any ambitions to do, and was kind of delivered to me on a plate, which sounds almost unbelievable, doesn't it? Obviously, performing with the Manics and recording with them, I wouldn't say it was a childhood dream, because again, I never could have dared to have thought that would happen. I mean, I think probably a real moment for me was supporting the Manics for the first time at the Eden Project in 2016, and I think it was like my 4th ever show as the Anchoress. To step out on stage and then sing Little Baby Nothing with them, there was a little lump in my throat. I just kind of felt like validation that all the tribulations and hard work that it had taken to get to that point, and it was really hard. I'm on the right track. I was supposed to do this. Not like I'm supposed to do this. I'm, like that, but as in, this was for it was difficult for a reason. And you got to do something you never could have dreamed of, and that was pretty special. I feel like it's bad. Like I've probably dissed the people that I've not mentioned as highlights, but I think it's just it all kind of mashes together. To be honest, the whole thing is a highlight. I am so lucky to do music for a living and to make music and record other artists as well. That is just as enjoyable to me as making my own music. So yeah, it's all let's wrap it up and call it one big highlight.
Good. I'd like to ask my guests the following few questions here. I think I probably know this before I ask you. Out of all the albums in your collection, who do you have the most albums by? What particular artist or band?
It's the Manic Street Preachers.
Yeah.
I confess.
And also, what have you been listening to recently? Do you could recommend to anyone watching?
Well, I was going to say, actually, it's probably a close run second for Fiona Apple. And she is the person I've been listening to most recently, Fetch the Bolt Cutters. I have not stopped listening to that since it came out during the first lockdown. incredible artist. Just rightly getting her celebration, I think, critically now as well. I remember years ago, I've always loved Fiona Apple, and it was just really uncool. And now it's just become a very cool thing to talk about. You know, Pitchfork, etc., are all kind of lauding her as this great genius, and I'm like, yeah, I've been like on about her for like 10 years. And it was just not a cool thing to say that you liked her before, and so it's nice that she's getting that that celebration, I think.
And is it a new album? Is it? She has it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, it just came out in, was it? I think it was April.
Right. I'll have to check it out because that's why I like asking people. So I've had a lot of good recommendations, you know. So
Oh my goodness! If you don't know, you must listen to it. It's absolutely incredible. A challenging listen, I would say. You know, not as commercial as perhaps some of her earlier records, and challenging themes and lyrics. But she is just absolutely a force. She really is. She's incredible.
Must check it out. Well, that's all my questions, Catherine. Hopefully it wasn't too bad.
That was nice and quick. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I've got this next to me as well, because I'm like, the album, kind of did it a while ago, can't remember. It's bad to say that, isn't it?